You surface from the underground at Piccadilly Circus,
Mind the gap.
making your way through the glittering lights of London's West End. You take a turn down a quaint-looking street into the notorious neighborhood of Soho, and you arrive at our intimate cafe. Welcome to The Big Smoke, a live-recorded variety show podcast. My name is Kevin Bennett, and I'll be your guide through this experience of comedy, conversation, and community. In this episode, you will hear a conversation with historian and author of the book Writing on the Wall, Madeleine Pelling, with the founder of Alternative London, the UK's first street art tour and workshop provider, and one of the UK's foremost experts on urban art, Gary Means. Later in the show, we will also have the brilliantly hilarious comedian Mark Silcox. Before we get to the episode, I thought I'd tell you a bit about this show. I'm someone who's been involved in theatrical ventures my entire life. I've always loved everything from the broadest of entertainment to the nichest of art forms. I've spent years directing Shakespeare plays while devouring sitcoms and talk shows every evening. So The Big Smoke to me it's about the importance of connection, community, and the ritual of gatherings. So let's get started with the crossword puzzle clue of the week. Adam, could you stand up for us? I want you to choose, first of all, give them one more round of applause. 6 crosswords in a minute? Oh my God. Okay, give us the clue and see if we can guess it. So first of all, say your name and which newspaper it is.
I'm Adam and I love the Daily Mail.
Okay, listen, I get one of every paper from the newsagent, so this isn't, just saying, it's not sponsored by the Daily Mail.
17 Down, which you don't need to know, but it really pisses my dad off at Christmas if you tell him.
17 Down
is a Spanish island in 5 letters.
Think you know the answer? Stay tuned to find out. Our title for today is called Heroes or Vandals. Who do you consider a hero? A vandal? Is there anyone who is both?
I think it's the type of person that has done the thing that I would aspire to do, like either by being better or by having more like fortitude to do it. And a vandal is someone like disrupts stuff or breaks stuff. Not necessarily a bad thing, but yes, someone that breaks stuff. For me, a hero would be someone like Andy Nyman's, just like a creative guy that has done all the things that I would love to at some point aspire to do. So yeah, he's a hero of mine personally because he's done all of the things that I would like to at some point achieve. But then like a vandal, almost like a Robin Hood type character to me, like someone that disrupts decorum a bit but not necessarily a bad thing. So he could be a hero and a vandal, I guess. Robin Hood might be one, but also maybe someone like Nelson Mandela or something. But yeah, anyone that brings about change for the better might be both.
A hero. I think someone who's very selfless, someone who stands up for marginalized communities, someone who's not afraid to voice out and be the different voice in the room, even though it's against what the majority thinks. I think it's someone who's rebellious but also artistic and creative, doesn't conform to what society expects of them. And I don't know, I think I have some kind of respect for vandals.
Without further ado, we have amazing guests here. So I want to get them up here so we can start chatting and getting to know them. I'm going to just read a little bit about them so you know who they are, and then we'll bring them to the stage. So first of all, Madeleine Pelling, Maddie Pelling, is a cultural historian, author, and broadcaster. She holds a PhD from the University of York, and her first book, Writing on the Wall, Graffiti, Rebellion, and the Making of 18th Century Britain, tells a history of the period through the marks its inhabitants left behind. Madeleine is the co-host of History Hits After Dark podcast and a regular contributor for television, having worked with broadcasters including Channel 4, Sky, and Warner Brothers. Her words appear in The Guardian, The Independent, BBC History Magazine, and History Today, as well as on Times and BBC Radio. Give Madeleine a big round of applause. I'm going to read our second guest, and then the both of you can come on up. So, along with Maddie,
we have Gary Means. Gary is the founder of Alternative London, the UK's first street art tour and workshop provider, and is considered one of the country's foremost experts on urban art. Alternative London has won over 20 travel awards and has been included in The Guardian Travel's top 10 guided tours in the world. Gary also founded Unit 5 Gallery, which exhibited and represented some of the world's top street artists and produced a series of large-scale murals and installations. His Apple Top 10 podcast has featured well-known names from the street art world alongside leaders of cultural institutions in East London. In 2016, he was voted one of the Evening Standard's inspirational Londoners. Please give a big round of applause for Gary and Madeline as they come to the stage. This is for you. There's water there for you. Oh my gosh. Okay, here we are. Now, I went to a event for another podcast called We Can Be Weirdos was the name of it. And they were doing a live event and Maddie was the speaker. And the host actually mentioned this book. And right away, I thought this sounds like such a fascinating topic. So did some research, spoke to Maddie, and she very kindly agreed to come here on the show. And immediately when I was brainstorming what kind of conversation we could have, not only about the book, but just about graffiti, street art, what it means in the world in general, I immediately thought Gary would be such an interesting person to kind of speak with her. So I took Gary's tour in East London a few years ago. And we'll talk more about it in a minute, but if you ever want to do something interesting and inspirational in London, whether somebody's visiting from out of town or you just want to have a nice day yourself, highly recommend it. Really, really interesting stories about East London and the graffiti and the street art. So, welcome. Thanks for being here.
It's a lovely introduction.
Well, thank you. I'll take that. But it's you guys. So, okay, we've got lots of stuff to talk about. I hope this isn't too weird, but I wanted to read a really short little passage from the book.
I'll close my
I won't
ears.
read it to you like I'm serenading you. I just think this gives you a bit of an idea. This is such a well-written book. It really reads like a page-turning novel. And
it is for sale tonight.
And it is for sale tonight. But I really, I mean that. I'm a slow reader, but I got through this really quick. So, telling history with graffiti is, for a historian, a tricky business. It can prove something of a treasure hunt, with each new discovery bringing heart-thumping excitement and an intense feeling of proximity to the past beyond the traditional order of the paper archive. Such marks are highly tangible, often uncatalogued, and ripe for discovery by any who happen upon them. Access can be difficult physical work requiring an able body and a sharp eye, not to mention an adventurous spirit in climbing ladders, squeezing into tight tunnels, and shuffling through long-neglected passageways. A complete record of graffiti can be made in the past, can never be attained, and for all they are carved into stone or wood, graffiti can be surprisingly fragile. Many have been lost over time. They are routinely painted or wallpapered over, built upon, erased, chipped, or weathered away, else lost to demolition and urban development. But what exactly is graffiti, and where do we draw the line, as it were? We know it when we see it, and yet it is difficult to define. The use of the term itself reflects something of its tendency to shapeshift and adapt. Graffiti is used both in its plural sense to refer to multiple marks, and in the singular to describe a whole genre of communication. Definition of graffiti is as difficult to pin down as the language around it is flexible. It is, perhaps, the contents of its messages that makes it what it is, or maybe it's the surface on which it's written, or it might be the medium or tool with which it is created. It can be all of these. It can be illicit, spontaneous, and provocative. It can be art. How we define and value graffiti and who we assign to do so says as much about a society as it does about the mark makers themselves. So on that note,
I have so many edits I want to make.
it's just my reading, I'm sure. So I wanted to start by asking you both something, which is just a really simple question. Why graffiti? This is obviously the prompt for your book. This is your first book. Obviously, it takes a lot of research and time to invest in something. Graffiti and street art is the central tenet of what you do as well, Gary. So what does it mean to you, and why does it interest you, and how did you come to it?
Yeah, we were chatting about this before, actually. Yeah, as I was telling Gary earlier, for me, it wasn't one big discovery. I always want to have an amazing story of, walking into a castle and seeing something incredible on the wall. But it was a lot of little moments. So I spent my PhD writing about aristocrats in the 18th century, and it was incredibly boring. And I told the same story again and again. And I kind of, I spent a lot of time in the archives looking at kind of traditional materials, letters, and that kind of thing. And I really wanted to hear voices of the people who were missing from that. And I would go to National Trust properties or a castle or an old church, whatever, and I would notice that people would walk past the marks on the wall, maybe like a carved initial or a date or something, and they didn't mean anything to the people going to those sites, I think, which is so interesting. And people would just literally walk past them and discount them as being meaningful. And so I wanted to kind of look at that and think about who might leave a mark like that, why they would do that, why in those places. And that took me down a massive rabbit hole, and I realized really quickly that historians also discount graffiti and haven't been interested in it until now, really. And so when I started to gather everything for the book, I realized there was a lot of material, and I could have done 10 books on this, and unfortunately wasn't allowed to by my publisher.
One to start.
Yeah.
How about you, Gary?
Yeah, I think, I grew up on the Isle of Wight, which, was basically a cultural waste ground. And I moved to London when I was 18 to study music, and I worked in music for a long time. But moving to London, I had not really experienced graffiti in person and sort of in the volume that I started to. And this was around the time, kind of around the late 90s, when street art started to emerge. And a lot of street artists that have become quite famous now were just starting to do their works around East London. And it just all felt very exciting. And it felt like the music industry was starting to become very corporate, a little bit boring. And the kind of street art just had this element of rebellion. It had an element of honesty to it as well. You could communicate your message and your idea without any filter or censorship or a label boss telling you you've got to do it differently or you've got to fit in somehow. So to me, it just kind of felt more punk rock than punk rock was at that time. And it just, it was something that really interested me. And we were chatting about this before, and I think maybe because I've got ADHD as well, and just this kind of hyper focus on certain things that I'm interested in. When we're doing tours, people will say, oh, there's all this stuff that you just always walk past. And that baffles me, because I'm like, I've never walked past any of this. Like, I've always noticed this stuff and taken it in. And it's always kind of spoke to me and tried to communicate with me. So that's how I first got involved in it, really, yeah.
Did you ever make graffiti yourself with it?
Yeah, but I'm not very good at it. I mean, I teach it, but I'm not very good at painting it. I'm all right.
One of the things that I was delighted by with reading this book, which is for sale that you can get later on, Writing on the Wall, through different times in history, society and people's reaction to the book, to graffiti, changed and shifted. And I was wondering if you could tell us, Maddie, kind of a whistle-stop tour almost through, like obviously, I know that's the whole book, but just, I know there were times when it was encouraged, and, writing your name or something on a monument or whatever was a positive thing. And I'm just curious if you could tell us a little bit about that shifting perspective.
Yeah, definitely. All of history settle in. People have always wanted to leave their mark, right? If you think back to the earliest cave paintings, there's always been that human compulsion to leave something of yourself in your environment, a message for other human beings, other animals. But for most of human history, graffiti has been a completely acceptable thing to do. There's been nothing illicit or dodgy or worrying or troublesome or even rebellious particularly about it, and it was a totally normal thing. So famous examples in history might include things like the graffiti that you find in the cells of Roman gladiators in Rome and Pompeii, which are usually boasts about conquests of other gladiators that they fought or women that they've had sex with, and nothing changes. And you see that in ancient Egyptian tombs. There's some really pornographic stuff in ancient Egyptian tombs. Google, like really, and in Europe up until the medieval times, graffiti was this totally normal thing to do, and it was part of like everyday practice. So, for example, if you wanted to get married in the medieval period, but you maybe couldn't afford to get married in a church, you might go as far as the porch of the church, and you would make your commitment to each other without a priest present. And to make it as holy as you possibly could, you might carve a heart or your initials or your family crest or something like that into the fabric of the church as a way to mark that. And that was totally acceptable. You might find the priest doing something similar on the wall next to you. Like, it wasn't a dodgy thing to do at all. And we see it really kind of documenting like these everyday concerns of people. So people would do graffiti about, I don't know, the ship that their brother had gone to sea on, and that might be almost like a spell or a prayer if you carve that into the wall to wish them well. Or sometimes you get graffiti of like farm tools or animals, or, you know, like, my chicken is sick, so I'll draw it on the wall of the church and it will get better, right? So it's kind of had like these magical qualities and these spiritual qualities. And it's really the 18th century and the period that my book covers where that changes, and graffiti, basically because people start to become literate across a broader section of society, and they start to write things and they start to challenge the status quo, and suddenly graffiti is this uncontrollable, as you say, uncensored, unregulated thing that starts to appear everywhere, and suddenly the power balance is challenged, and therefore the authorities start to worry about it. And that's what we've kind of inherited today. It's from the 18th century.
That was one of the really interesting things I loved about the book, is just sort of charting people's perceptions of it, because I only thought of it as something that a lot of people would be against, you know? So it was a really interesting kind of journey. Yeah, so I was curious, Gary, just kind of going off of that, in one of the, I was listening to, Gary has a great podcast as well, where he interviews people who are part of the street art community. And in the one with Jay Kays, I love this quote: "Graffiti is a part of any democratic society," he said. "It's the voice of the unheard, the people's voice, taking the public space and using it for yourself." In your experience, what has been, I mean, you walk through Shoreditch in East London, it feels like it's embraced. I'm curious what your experience has been showing people around there. Is it still something that feels really rebellious, or is it, I don't know, kind of gentrified and now really accepted in a way? Like, what's the state of it now, I guess?
Yeah, good question. I love JK's, by the way.
It's
Such
great.
A great guy, man.
Yeah,
Great
really
guy.
good.
So for me, I would kind of break it down into two kind of distinct things these days. You have street art, which is the kind of figurative artworks, and then you have graffiti, which is kind of the more traditional letter styles. And for me, for it to be graffiti, it kind of has to be done illegally. Whereas a lot of the street art, something like a stencil, you would prepare it beforehand and then you'll get it up very quickly, so it's done illegally. But a lot of the bigger pieces now, they're done with the permission of the building owner, so they can spend a lot of time and effort producing them. In that sense, yes, the community has always supported this artwork because, you know, we always say it's important to recognize the artists, but it's also important to recognize the people that are giving permission to these artists, because they are allowing this canvas basically and allowing this scene to kind of develop into what it has. But that is all kind of at odds with the people in charge and the people in power. They still don't like it. The maximum penalty now, since the Conservatives' police crime and sentencing bill, is 10 years in prison for painting on a surface. So we're living in this kind of strange era where I've been at a wall when people have been painting it, and if the police come along and they see them doing like a beautiful picture or what they perceive to be a beautiful picture, they'll just say, "Oh, that looks nice," and walk off. But if they caught someone writing their nickname on a wall or writing something like "F the police" or something letter-based, they're being handcuffed and in the back of the van, facing 10 years in jail before their feet touch the ground. So now the police have become art critics to a point, and they get to like decide what's good or bad or right or wrong, when the law is still that you're putting paint on the surface that doesn't belong to you. And then also I feel that just within society, just the way that graffiti has been talked about so much in our culture as this bad thing, as vandalism for so long, the majority of the people will say, I like the nice stuff, but I hate the tags. I hate the bad stuff. I don't like this.
That's exactly the same in the heritage space as well.
Really?
Right? That, you know, people looking at like English Heritage or National Trust now, you know, they will find pieces of medieval graffiti that are like an image or something like a daisy wheel, which is like a sort of good luck spell.
Yeah.
And they'll be, you know, they'll draw visitor attention to it, and they might even put a bit of perspex over it and be like, you know, here's a little bit of writing to go alongside it and tell you what it is. But if there's something that, for example, I don't know, there's some like pornographic sketches by servants in the attic of a country house, they won't include that as part of the history of the building, and they think that it's something their audience don't want. And again, it's that, you know, that even the graffiti itself isn't necessarily subject to censorship while it's being made, the ways in which it's preserved or the ways in which it's protected are, and the way it's collected as well, right? And it's interesting you say that with the police, because it's definitely the same in heritage spaces as well.
It's crazy, isn't it?
One of your episodes, I don't think it was the same one, in your podcast, Gary, somebody talked about one of the, I guess, tricks or ways to do bigger pieces now is just to do them in broad daylight. Like set up your big ladder or whatever that
Get
you
your
need.
high-vis jacket on. Look like you're supposed to
Look
be
like
there.
you're supposed to be there. And
So simple.
I just love the idea of these people doing, you know, these crimes in broad daylight. You briefly mentioned in the book, Maddie, I just wanted to, in case anyone wants to know, what is the history of the word graffiti? Where does it come from?
Yes, so it actually is a 19th century invention. So we didn't have one word for this kind of mark making for most of human history. So in the 18th century, people call it things like diary writing, wall writing, diamond writing, which is my favorite, which is what rich people used to do with diamond rings or jewelry of any kind. They would sharpen it to a point and write on things like drinking glasses the name of the girl that you wanted to sleep with, or little witty poem in the pub when you've had too many, and things like that. And the word, I love, that's my favorite kind of graffiti in a lot of ways, and it's what survives, right, because it's done by richer people and on glass as well, and it's been preserved. But there's a whole kind of issue with that. But the word graffiti comes in the 19th century when archaeologists go to Pompeii and they're excavating there, and they find all the graffiti from the Romans, and they need a word for it. And so it's these English, German, and French archaeologists who are like, let's come up with like a sort of pseudo-Italian word for this. And with that word and that sort of label comes all of these negative connotations as well.
And so it's a word that they invented, but is graffito a word as well?
Yeah, so that's the singular.
That's the singular,
of it.
right? So I was correct in the beginning when I said graffito. I want to throw up the first image of the Banksy monkeys. Did anyone raise your hand if you saw any of the Banksys around London? Did anyone find any? Did anyone find the monkeys that are about to appear? So I came back from Canada. I was on holiday when they were all being revealed. I was surprised at the way they are now presented. I don't know if you can see from there, but there's a nice little frame and plastic covering. I had to get a really specific, there we go, angle. It was hard with the sun shining to really even see them. And I was quite offended, if I'm being honest, that they were covered up like this. Mostly from what I remember, maybe I'm misremembering this, but I remember in Gary's fascinating tour, just talking about tagging and how the sort of ephemeral nature of graffiti. So I'm just curious from both of you what your thoughts are on this. The fact that it's being covered up now, preserved, clearly so that no one can add to it, change it, adapt it. What do you think, Gary?
How long we got, Kevin? It's bonkers. For me, before the perspex even goes up, the whole kind of circus around there being a Banksy on that street is just, it blows me away every time. Just going down Brick Lane, there was reporters. We were getting calls and emails from people all day asking us to talk about it for their news channels and things. And you look around you and there are hundreds of pieces of artwork by dozens of artists. Some of them are selling paintings in galleries for huge sums of money. Some of them are doing the most intricate and amazing pieces of artwork that you've ever seen, but they don't see any of that, and they are just reporting this one thing. Imagine, I do link things back to music quite a bit, because I do think there's especially a lot of similarities between street art and graffiti and punk and hip hop. But imagine that the newspapers and the press, when they write about music, they only write about Taylor Swift. They've never written about another performer ever. and you know that there's all that other stuff out there, and that she might be the best to some people, but she's just one individual that's highly successful, it would be fucking bonkers, wouldn't it? It would be imagine that world. It would be fucking mad. And that's what it's like being in this world. That's kind of what it's like to me. The whole issue with the perspex as well, I have a kind of a separate issue with that. The fact that we were talking about the fact that people can go to prison for up to 10 years. The people putting those people in prison are the people putting the perspex on that.
Sorry, is the perspex the cover?
The cover.
Yeah.
That's done by the local authorities who are actively taking young men, predominantly young men, to jail, to court, and putting them in prison for very lengthy periods and completely ruining their lives for putting a bit of paint on a surface exactly the same as this person is doing. And I just cannot get my head around that. And it just really stinks of hypocrisy. And if you think, well, the authorities are doing it with something so basic as art, what else are they up to? If they're that corrupted over something like this, what else are they doing?
I mean, I felt when I saw this, I was remembering the story that Gary told a few years ago. And for me, it was the idea that if the artist wanted it to be preserved in that way, then they wouldn't be working in the way that they're working. So there was something for me about the culture of it's meant to not be there forever. It's meant to have people add to it. And obviously Banksy's become this whole other thing. But I just sort of thought, wow, this is kind of feels like the opposite of everything that it is.
It's true, and it's kind of partly because of the value of it as well, like that it becomes like a sort of a commodity. But I feel that you're kind of then taking something out of its natural environment. A piece of artwork is meant to get tagged. It's meant to get graffitied, and most people would accept that as an artist. It's like if you've made beautiful wedding cakes and someone chopped into it and you got upset, you're in the wrong business. You know that, like when you're, you know that when you're doing this, like there's a ruder version of that, but I won't do that. But yeah. But anyway,
I'm gonna be thinking the rest of the show what that is.
Yeah. So, and it's a similar kind of thing. You're kind of extracting that out of its natural lifespan, I guess.
I think as a historian, it's interesting because in 200 years' time, someone's going to be thrilled that that was saved.
Yeah.
But think of everything that's lost, right? And I think it's so hard because I think when I was writing the book and looking for graffiti from 200, 300 years ago, a lot of what I came across doesn't exist anymore. And it only existed because it had been documented in some way. And the meaning of that graffiti, I could only glean because people had written in their diaries, you know, saw this giant cock on the wall, which was a real thing that people did in the 18th century. Nothing changes, you know. And they'd be like, but it was also next to a pub called the Cock Inn, and like that was the joke or something, right? And like that, it was meant to be ephemeral and it was meant to be lost, and no one thought to save it. But we can get to it in different ways, and I think, you know, with Banksy, obviously everything gets documented instantly. Like as you say, the news crews descend and everything gets put on Instagram and all the rest of it. And I think the ephemerality of it, and the fact that it is a race to get to the site, and that people, you know, get really into the idea of going to see it before it gets tagged, or before it gets stolen or taken down or whatever, or in this case covered in perspex, that's part of the magic of it and the art of it, right? And if it's, to me, that's like taking it out of the conversation, that it's in this street with all these other voices, and for better or worse, whether it survives or not, like that's not really the point, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Speaking of stencils, can we grab the picture that Maddie sent of the stencils? So the book is not just words, there's images in it, lots of great images of graffiti, as you would think, and also some interesting illustrations that have graffiti within them. But there's one in particular that I just think is interesting, maybe, here it is, to switch over to, because this would be people using stencils similar to what a lot of people do now, and Banksy obviously does. I'd love to hear kind of where this comes from. Basically, I asked both of them to bring us some images. The monkeys was mine. I didn't do the art, but I brought the image. And these two generously sort of brought some images that inspired them. So tell us why you chose this one, Maddie, and a little bit about its place in the book.
Yeah, so this is smoke graffiti. So this is made when people cut out stencils and they hold it up against the surface and they use a lit candle and smoke around them. And these are they're on the ceiling, a plaster ceiling of a barracks in Berwick-upon-Tweed, which is now in England, but at various points it's been in Scotland. It changes throughout history, sort of its position. And it has this really contested identity as an English and a Scottish site. And these were barracks built in the 18th century by the British Army to put their soldiers right on that border against the Jacobite threat. So the Jacobites, not to go too deep into the history, but essentially a sort of a threat to the Hanoverian monarchy, so the Georgian kings. And in the 18th century, there were various uprisings in Scotland, and the British Army was sent into the Highlands and all around the north of England to put those down, and they famously culminated in 1745 when the whole Jacobite army is destroyed at Culloden, famously. And for anyone who's an Outlander fan, hopefully that's ringing true. And these were produced by the soldiers who were sent there, and it's really hard to get the meaning of them now. This is a space that they would have used recreationally, and graffiti was part of that practice of sort of relaxing. And we see things reflected here like sort of everyday 18th century objects. So there's shoes, there's animals, there's women's dresses, there's some soldiers doing drill, which as far as I can work out, the weird shapes are actually made with rifle cleaning kits from the 18th century. So these guys are using the objects around them to make this graffiti. But the thing that I love is the one playing card that is actually a playing card is down here, and it's the 9 of diamonds, and it's the only card in this deck that is a legitimate playing card. And in the 18th century, the 9 of diamonds was known as the Curse of Scotland. And it was this sort of running folklore idea that the Scottish monarchs were all tyrants, and that Scotland was this kind of cursed place. And the British would evoke this card in card games as a sort of political moment. So I love that there are soldiers based on this really contentious place making this very political graffiti, and a graffiti that everyone on both sides of the border would have understood and been able to read the meanings of.
I love it. It really stood out to me when I was reading the book because of how creative it is. I mean, there's a lot of stuff with people etching with, knives or their jewelry or things, and letters and carving their names and messages and things. But this is so, I just thought it was so creative. And the fact, I don't know if you guys can tell, but it's like they use smoke and a candle or something to burn into it. And I just think it's really beautiful. There's lots of unique ways that people make graffiti now. And one of Gary's images that maybe we'll pull up it's the one with all the, not string. Thread. Yeah, the one with the thread. There's lots of different unique ways. I'd love you to just tell us a little bit about maybe this artist.
This is an artist from Manchester, actually, like you, called Perspicaere, which means perspective in Latin. And he takes a piece of wood and he hammers nails into it, and then he takes a roll of sewing thread and threads it over the nails. This one is a much larger scale piece. This one he did recently that broke the world record for the largest piece of thread art. And you can see he's actually designed this kind of pole. So he's got the thread at the bottom of it. And this is just an object that he uses to kind of thread all these different pieces over it. And if we can have next slide, please. There it is.
Look at that. Isn't that incredible?
So it's the finished piece. And I mean, the actual
thread,
the way that he does it is just incredible. But the other thing, he's completely colorblind. So he's doing these full color pieces now. I was chatting to him once, and he said that he was at like nursery school or something, and he was coloring in Bugs Bunny with a grey pencil. And the next day he came back and he picked up like a pink pencil and carried on doing it. And the teacher asked, what are you doing at 2 colors? And he's like, I'm not. So he's legitimately, he really can't see colors, but he's still doing stuff like this on that kind of scale just with thread. It's quite incredible, isn't it?
Where is this one?
So that one is on Whitecross Street. So you can see that on our bike tours.
Amazing. If you're wandering through East London, there's a few others, I think.
There's loads in East London. If you look up and look around for them, you will see them. They're generally circular, about this kind of size. Yeah, really amazing. He kind of, he does a broad array of people, but I like the way that he also represents people in the Brick Lane community as well, like Bangladeshi women. And he's got a really nice, not just a great technique, but a really nice process and approach to his artwork as well.
I was thinking too, something that's beautiful about this is how fragile it is. Yeah. This is so, like, they obviously can't last long, being made of thread. So, when you see them, you're getting a slice of it in that moment, and it obviously changes quite quickly with weather and things like that. I wanted to jump back into the book, actually, and there's so many great stories. We don't have time to go through all of them, but the first chapter in the book is it reads like a gripping novel. and it's kind of the start of how graffiti, I guess, affected society and was used as a tool. Well, I won't say, I'll let you kind of maybe tell us a little bit about that story.
This is the opening chapter of the book, and the book goes in chronological order. So it starts in the 1680s and ends just before Queen Victoria comes to the throne. So it's right at the beginning of this moment when graffiti is going to change Britain and change how people think about it. And it's in 1688. There's this woman who is she's a French Catholic midwife, immigrant to the city. And she's living in Covent Garden with her abusive husband who beats her on a routine basis. And she's just trying to survive. And every now and then she will leave him and she'll go and find rooms somewhere else in the city. And he always finds her. And one night he comes back drunk and he beats her up and it's really horrendous. And we have her testimony, which still exists, and it makes a pretty brutal reading. She waits till he's asleep and he's really, really drunk, and she takes the garter from his legs. So men didn't wear trousers at the time. They wore sort of like stockings and then shorts, essentially. And she takes it from his leg, she wraps it around his neck, and she pulls. And 15 minutes later, he's dead. And she immediately panics. And there's this really nice detail in the book, which I found in her testimony, where she says she then pours herself a giant brandy, which fair enough. And then she is stuck with this body and she doesn't know what to do. And because she's a midwife, she's got lots of sharp implements. So she chops him up. She chops his head off and his arms and his legs, and she wraps up all the pieces, and she walks out into the night in Covent Garden, and she disposes of him in back alleys and public toilets, because that's what he deserved.
Not far from here.
Yeah, really not far from, like, these streets.
Stone's throw.
It really is. And eventually, so she thinks she's got away with it. And eventually one of his friends comes looking for him. So the husband who's been murdered works in France, and he travels back and forth, sort of ferrying things, different goods for people. And his mate comes and says, he comes to knock on the door to say, we've got a job, let's go back to France. And of course finds him not at home. So he takes a bit of chalk out of his pocket, because everyone carried chalk in the 17th century. It was a really useful way of drawing directions, of leaving messages, of keeping your bar tab, or keeping track of your game of cards in a pub. There's lots of records of people getting into like full-on bar fights because someone's like nudged the score on the wall and it's all hell's broken loose. So he takes this piece of chalk out of his pocket and he writes, hey man, in French, I came by, you weren't there, meet me at this chapel round the corner tomorrow. And she makes the mistake of going to the chapel and meeting him instead. And she says, he's gone to the West Indies. He's gone. It's fine. He's absolutely fine, but he's gone. And the friend's like, I'm not sure about this. And then the body parts start to get discovered, and he puts two and two together. And she is caught, and she's burned at the stake in what is now Leicester Square, unfortunately.
And isn't he buried at St. Giles Church?
The parts of him.
Parts of him, which isn't far from here.
So he was on display for quite a while before that. So everyone got really overexcited about finding these body parts. And there was a pub in the weeks after this where they basically had him on display and charged people, and you could go in and see him, which was typical of the time. But
I mean, what I just think is so interesting, it's like that bit of graffiti that was the evidence.
That's why she's caught out, and it's the first time that I could find that graffiti is mentioned in print. So the whole case is written down, her testimony is printed and published in London, and there is mention of this chalk graffito that catches her out. And it's the first time really that people start to realise that the marks all around them that are just everyday normal things, the bar tab or the game of cards, whatever, that actually they are an insight into different lives and things that you don't necessarily see every day, including criminality. And it really sparks this suspicion of graffiti that just grows in that period.
Yeah, I love how, first of all, it just strikes me again how normal it is for people to graffiti at that time. The piece of chalk is like the iPhone, you carry it with you everywhere for all of those different purposes. And how it's really gripping as you read that. First of all, the whole story of her and her tragic story and kind of being backed into a corner and doing this thing, and really hearing the story, which I'm sure all of those parts of the story probably weren't told at that time. And then the just, I guess, fear and effect that people had in society, knowing that the marks that they left on the wall were going to be interpreted and potentially used and noticed in a way. It's a really interesting start to the book. We just have a couple more minutes, but the last thing in the book actually that is really striking, that I think connects the two of you in your worlds, is you talk about a piece of modern graffiti and the way, and I'll let you explain what it is, but that exists now on a historical monument, I guess, and kind of how it's being displayed. I'd love for you to just tell us what that is. It doesn't ruin the end, don't worry, of the book if you read it. But I think it's really interesting because I'd heard the story of what happened to that piece, but I didn't know how it's now currently being displayed. And then just any thoughts that you have upon hearing it, Gary, after we hear.
Yeah, so I was looking for a piece of graffiti to kind of tie the book together, and I was looking for maybe modern graffiti done on an 18th century object or an object that was harking back to the 18th century. And the thing that really stood out for me and the sort of the commentary around it was the Colston statue. And when that was toppled in Bristol, there'd been spray painted Black Lives Matter all over it. And
Sorry, can you tell who was the statue
so
of?
Edward Colston was a slave trader and philanthropist in very loose terms.
You guys remember hearing about that when it was knocked into the water in Bristol?
Yeah, so it was the statue was graffitied and then it was toppled and put into the water, and it was eventually dredged out, I think a few weeks later, it wasn't long, and it was put on display in Bristol's M Shed gallery. And there was a commentary around it that was the main issue was not that it had been toppled, but that it had been graffitied and that it was a historic object and therefore, shouldn't have been graffitied in that way. And there was this really provocative piece in the Telegraph, of course, which talked about, it said something like, have we stumbled on a murder scene? And it made out that the graffiti was like a weapon and that it had been used on the body of Colston himself, not this inanimate piece of bronze. And I just thought that was so fascinating. And I think graffiti for me is a way into the past, and it's a way to challenge it as well as to document it. And graffiti is present, as I say, throughout all of human history. And in our own moment, that's just as valid what it has to say about the time that we live in. And as a historian, I don't have any problem with people graffitiing the statues of slave traders.
And what was graffitied on it? Sorry if you mentioned that
Black
already.
Lives Matter.
And BLM.
BLM, yeah.
And then I just found it really interesting that it's on display left that way.
Yes, so the curators made the decision not to remove the
graffiti.
graffiti.
Like that,
Which, the graffiti is now part of its story in the same way that the graffiti on the Berlin Wall is part of its story, or graffiti on the pyramids are part of the story of empire and travel in the 20th century, or, it's for me, it's part of that history and should be preserved as part of it.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that it's something that does repeat itself through time as well. If you look at something like the New York subways in the 1980s, where graffiti really started to come to life in its current form, and there was this huge campaign by the mayor of New York City to get the carriages cleaned up. They said this is visual pollution. We need to get rid of all this visual pollution, and they spent millions and millions getting it all cleaned up, putting people in jail. And now if you go to New York and you look at these subway trains, they are all covered from bottom to top in advertisements for companies. So they've still got the visual pollution, but now it's just part of the system that's generating profit. And if we think about something like a tag, people will say, I don't like people tagging places. But if you think, you walk down the street every day and you'll see McDonald's, Coca-Cola tags everywhere in your visual landscape, like in that visual pollution. And people say they're paying for it, but they don't pay any tax in this country. They don't put anything good back into the society. So it's just about that ownership of space for me, and who gets to decide how our visual environment looks. Because if an individual does it, it can be the cause for an uprising in some cases. So as you alluded to as well, it's like if it can't be controlled, it's contained. But if you paint on a statue or a train or something like that, it's very, very much hands off, I think, isn't it?
I just want to read a little bit more to end off here from towards the end of the book, 2 little passages. Towards the end here in the conclusion, although mark making was by no means limited in the 18th century to British shores, it had helped define the national character in undeniably specific and highly tangible ways at home and across the globe. It had openly challenged power, made visible popular complaints, and spread rumor, humor, and panic. It had put the nation in conversation with itself, and, for better and worse, had allowed everyone a voice, albeit often fleeting. It had become bold and visceral, engaging with and even affecting events in real time. Despite the fear and resentment it routinely struck into the hearts of those in power, or perhaps because of it, mark making had garnered sustained attention from writers, artists, politicians, rebels, factory workers, soldiers, and prisoners. As a language, it had developed its own vocabularies and codes, evolving in reaction to contemporary cultural and political shifts. What had started out as everyday and unremarkable in the earliest decades of the period had quickly grown into something more effective, bearing witness to and intervening in public and private lives. It provoked, fascinated, and repulsed. It had united communities and torn them apart, mocked so-called polite society, and aspired to it. Graffiti was, above all, human. So, thanks, you two. Really beautiful.
In each show, we like to hear how you are fostering connection and community. We call this a parish notice.
We put like coffee and friends because that's how we connect with each other. We're gonna also travel together, so we're gonna take some coffees and talk.
Okay, I'm Ahmad Kuzera, and I just want my parish is like having a cup of coffee at sacred grounds would definitely be a great environment to connect with others. I mean, always you have to find a place that you're not just by yourself, but like having a coffee, going to football, to musical events, VR, kind of postcard. That's where you can connect with people.
Hi, my name's Aggie. I'm Martha. And our parish note is we're going to a festival tomorrow. So we're going to...
We're gonna connect with the community by all listening to the same music, dancing to the same music,
being
together
one
with our friends, and then meeting new people, hopefully old friends, people from all over London, kind of all coming together. So we're really excited.
Thank you.
Okay, my name is Susan, and my parish notices are that I had dinner before coming here this evening, bringing my daughter Martha and her oldest friend, one of her oldest friends, Aggie, and we had dinner together in Soho in a really nice place with my partner and our dog Greta, who gave Dobby ears every time you said her name.
Hi, it's me, Amika. I'm originally from Nepal. It's my first experience in here, and I really loved it. Thank you so much for having me.
Here we go. Welcome to the second half of the Big Smoke. Make your way to your seats. Make your way. Okay, so Mark Silcox. I'm so excited for you guys to meet him. Mark Silcox is a hilarious comedian, actor who has been performing since 2008. He is most known for being a stand-up, making it to the finals of the BBC New Comedy Award in 2013, and being one of several Asian comedians to be featured on BBC's The Big Asian Stand-Up, as well as for his starring role as Joe Lycett's assistant on the Channel 4 consumer rights comedy show Joe Lycett's Got Your Back. According to his Instagram bio, he's also a science teacher and a ping pong player. Please give a warm round of applause for Mark Silcox.
One of the best American comedian is Steve Martin. I was reading his biography, and his advice to the comedian is to always dress better than your audience. Thank you for choosing this informal live events. And you have seen lots of fun and games in the beginning. And then you have a very serious discussion about history of various things. There are also some other live events like musical events or singing events you go to, and you can appreciate the hard work it goes into getting to that stage where people can come and see you. Yeah, it's really hard to get to those stores as a singer and songwriters. and then you sit in the audience, and then you appreciate their hard work, and you show their respect and different times in the show without actually disturbing their hard work. Because either you already know them because you have listened to them in the pristine quality recordings, so you already know how good they are, but you still want to pay extra to watch live. You know? So if they make mistake, that will make your day. You will talk about this. Oh, I've seen that singer and he was really bad when I saw him. And that will become your like story. Whenever his name mentioned, you will mention that event. Yeah. Similar thing goes to theater. When you watch a theater production, you are forced to respect because there's so many barriers in your enjoyment. So you stuck in a small chair and you have to listen every word carefully. Otherwise, people sitting next to you, they won't appreciate if you make any noise. You're not even allowed to eat crisp. And so it automatically creates a barrier which known in the industry as a fourth wall. So you have to respect the fourth wall and hope something goes wrong. But stand-up comedy is different. In stand-up comedy, we don't mind if the fourth wall breaks down. That make a gig a unique, special because you're also part of the team in the same experience. I will try to tell joke, but sometime best laugh of the night comes when something happens in the room. Right? So best joke of the night comes from the audience sometime. I don't think it's going to happening tonight. And in stand-up comedy, comedians have lots of pre-prepared jokes and they make jokes on the spot. And then we combine pre-prepared jokes with new jokes seamlessly. Now I'm going to start my routine. There is a moment in every comedian's life when they make a decision to become a stand-up comedian. For some people it's obvious because they make their friends laugh all the time. And everybody tells them, you are very funny, you should be a comedian. So they start doing comedy. And they also have a skill set. They have good command over languages. They can speak more than one languages. And they also have very strong acting skill. They can act out every sentence they speak. And they also have large collection of colorful t-shirts and skinny jeans and colorful trainers. They also have large collection of similes and metaphors to describe every experience they have. And they go for holidays all the time. So they have lots of holidays romance stories to share. And they have extrovert personality. They can go into any pubs, bars and clubs and talk to the strangers. And when they are talking to the strangers, they don't talk about weather. They get into deep conversation about life and relationship and politics and religion, all topic they can discuss freely. And the depth of the conversation you can guess while looking at the empties on the table. So they have lots of opportunity for one night stand. And they also have lots of experience of all kind of sexual activities. They also have first-hand experience, knowledge and information of all known STDs. STDs are very painful. That's what I've heard. My decision moment to become a stand-up comedian came when I was watching a documentary. And it was about a stand-up comedy, and professor in the documentary was claiming that you don't have to be born funny to become a stand-up comedian. You can learn techniques in the classroom. So I did that course. That course has changed my life. I'm a much better person now. I drink plenty of water. I go for a long walk. I eat an apple every day. The best decision I ever made. First thing they will teach you on the course is how to hold a microphone. Nailed it. How to write some jokes and how to start a show with high energy. It was a 12-week course. There were lots of worksheets on the course. I completed all the worksheets, and there were 5 assignments. I completed those assignments and submitted them on time and got the top grade because I'm an academic. You should have seen my final presentation I did in PowerPoint. I used all the features of PowerPoint: flying text, rotating text, videos, animations, larger than life arrows, paragraph with bullets, paragraph with numbers, paragraph without bullet and numbers. You should have, when slide break down into pieces and disappears and new slide appears, I use that slide transition with broken glass sound effect. And that was the best presentation in the whole group. To have a good show, you have to understand the psychology of your audience, why they are here with you. For example, if the show is starting very late, like 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night in central London, that means all your audience are drunk and they are tired and they are just looking for a place to sit down. And they don't want to go home early, because if they go home early, their neighbors and children might think that they don't know how to have a good time. So they will sit down in the comedy club, and to engage that audience in your comedy, you need lots of material, which is like vivid description of all kind of sexual activities. That's the only thing will keep them engaged in your comedy. And that's my specialty. But if the show is starting decent time, like this one, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, that means your audience are intelligent people and they like comedy and they have analytical mind. They prefer Microsoft Excel, Microsoft Word. And they are very supportive of all kind of activities happening in the room. Right? You don't mind whatever is happening in the room. There was some gameplay in the beginning. Then there was serious discussion about various things. Because you're very supportive, because you understand the value of live events, and then you support them equally because you are good people. Yeah, you are beautiful, hardworking, and honest people. Yeah, give yourself a big round of applause. And respond very well to a little bit of flattery. Stand-up comedy is the best invention in human society, because here I have a full freedom of speech. I can say anything I like. And you also hear the same thing at workplace. At workplace, you hear it all the time. Oh, we are a flat organization. Anyone can talk to anyone. All creative ideas are welcome. You hear that all the time at workplace. But those are all lies. Because at workplace, there's no freedom of speech. You say one thing wrong, and then you might not get a promotion. Because at workplace, there are lots of hidden hierarchies and power structure, and people are playing mind games on each other. They have their spreadsheet to control all the resources. And you talking to someone very friendly, you said something, and then next thing you know, you get fired. Then you will be sitting at home, watching daytime television, watching loose women from your bedroom windows, watching lots of documentaries, and next thing you know, you register yourself for a stand-up comedy course. But here I have a full freedom of speech. I can say anything I like, and because stand-up comedy is the celebration of freedom of speech, and I'm supposed to come here and tell you some jokes, but I haven't told you any joke. And nothing you can do about it. Thank you.
Mark Silcox, everybody.
It's time to hear the answer to that crossword puzzle clue.
Spanish island in 5 letters. Does anyone think they have it? Yes, over here. Ibiza?
Yeah.
Ibiza? Very good.
It's now time for Victorian parlor games. All games, from the Roman gladiatorial battles to a quiet round of cards or charades, are imitations of real-life situations. The activity of playing games is the expression of an instinct. For play is far older than culture, older even than prehistory. So here's our offering to you, a way to connect with your friends and family and have a bit of fun. Today's game is Alternative Pictionary. This is Pictionary, but with a big smoke, alternative London twist. Now, you know the basic Pictionary. All you need is some pens, paper, some of your friends, of course. Graffiti comes with its challenges. So whether that's creating at night, creating on odd surfaces, or using alternative materials to make your art. So, Alternative Pictionary. Each round will have a different additional challenge to make the experience a bit spicy. There are a few different ways to do this. You could do a different challenge each round. It also depends if you're having anything to drink, depending on how difficult or safe you want it to be. So, round 1 could be use a pair of tongs in order to hold the drawing pen. So you can't touch the pen with your hand, but you use a pair of tongs. I found a pair of wooden tongs that would normally be used in the kitchen. And it's quite hilarious seeing someone try to grip the pen with the tongs and draw. Round 2, very simple, blindfolded. All you need is a scarf or a blindfold for that one. Blindfolded drawing. Now, another round. I found something in one of the local stores near me called a blow pen. And basically, it's a type of pen you can get at most sort of craft stores or things like that, where when you blow into the back, it like sprays out the other end, almost like you're making your own kind of spray paint. This one is particularly hilarious at the end of the night if you're a little bit tired or whatever. So one thing that I think could be fun for, if you do get your hands on some of these blow pens, is basically doing it in tandem with someone else. So you get a team, a pair of 2, and you basically do it one breath at a time. So it would be my turn, I would blow and just take one exhalation. Then it would be my partner's turn and they would do the same, and we go back and forth until they guess correctly. There are lots of other options that you could do. You could do another tandem round where 2 people are holding the pen together. One person is only allowed to be in charge of horizontal movements, and the other person is only allowed to be in charge of vertical movements. So kind of like an Etch-a-Sketch, which could be a really funny and ridiculous one. Basically, it's an endless amount of possibilities. This one does require a little bit of thinking and planning and setting up, but if you're having some friends over on the weekend, or a barbecue, whatever you're doing at your house or in a park, this could be potentially a really fun one if you just took a couple minutes to get a couple of extra supplies. So have fun. Let us know how it goes. Tag us in on social media, on Instagram, and we'd love to see your rounds of Alternative Pictionary. That's all for today's episode. If you'd like to see the images I was speaking about with Maddie and Gary, check out our Instagram post on this episode. If you'd like to check out one of our live shows, information on how to book tickets is in our Instagram bio or on our Eventbrite page. Thanks for listening.
Well, so long until we meet again. I'm so glad that you were here, my friends. And the time may be fast, but good friendships will last. So long until we meet again. Good night, everybody.